It's a Friday, 900 hours Central Africa time. It's the weekend, my lady. Jumbo Africa. And a warm welcome to the first hour here in the newsroom. I'm Elvis Preslin.
And I'm Kendall Makamate.
We will be with you until 12 o'clock today. Now, today we focus on research by the World Economic Forum, which reveals that educational institutions here in this country are lagging behind in equipping our learners with the skills that they require, such as science and technology, artificial intelligence, and entrepreneurship, to be employable in the coming years. So that's why we're asking this question today, Kendall.
And I think it's pertinent. What skills should our youth be equipped with for our future?
Yes, because look at that. People standing on the robots, no skills at all. I mean, they do have skills, but they're not employable. Well, we're also conducting a poll today on SAFA. We finally appointed a coach. And that coach is Stuart Baxter. He's the new Bafana coach, Kendall.
100%. It makes a comeback, and a lot of people have got lots of opinions on it. If you ever look at it, 106 votes have already come in, Elvis.
So far, 39% of you are saying, yes, we're happy. 61% are saying, no, we're not happy. I wonder why you're not happy. So let's find out why people are not happy.
Let's see. Well, Video comes in with another bunch of losers is in the SAFA net. We're going nowhere. We need to reshuffle SAFA first.
This one from Lunga says, I feel Gavin Hunt should be told he's up next, especially if he wins the league with Wits. Yes, long time coming.
Sitsaba Kwep says, I'm not happy at all because of payment of R1 million, but Sheikh's payment is $500,000. Politics, kwa SAFA.
There's one from Samuel says, I'm happy for Mr. Baxter. As a supporter, we need to give him full support and stay positive. I believe he will take us to Russia.
And Siafana says, I'm not happy at all because Baxter was a coach of Bafana before. Nothing was done for us as a nation. So now, what changes are coming with this new Bafana coach?
Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Siafana, they say?
Yep.
Well, there you have it. Those are some of your comments. Please keep them coming on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom as well as on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at your news headlines. The Justice Minister, Michael Masood, is expected to oppose the release of Janusz Wolusz on parole in the Supreme Court of Appeal. Judgment on the bail application of two Northwest men accused of killing a 16-year-old boy at Colini expected today. And the World Economic Forum on Africa concludes today. That's your headlines for the news, but before we get there, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. It's the weekend coming, Kendall.
100%. Obviously, the big news coming out of yesterday is Stuart Baxter going back into his post as Bafana coach after a couple of years, having taken a break. Lots of soccer and lots of rugby as well as athletics on the cards. And something to look forward to, Elvis.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, we'll be looking forward to all of that. In fact, let me tell you what we've got planned for you in the sports for today. The long-awaited selection of the Bafana coach has finally been made, and Stuart Baxter is the man in the hot seat.
It's a chicken or the egg. Do we get the support then play well, or do we play well then get the support? I think, we should be looking to give them something to shout about.
The McClumbys and company. McClumbie up into the area. Time for Marachila. Goal!
It is crunch time in the PSL as Bidvest Wits extend their lead at the top of the log with a 1-0 win against Pirates, and Mamelodi Sundowns salvage a 2-2 draw against Platinum Stars.
Mamelodi Sundowns are level, and it is Zachary.
You never know. Sometimes you're not happy with the point. Maybe you need that point. So, yeah. But to be honest, we should have won.
It will be Rashford to strike it. This time Alvarez can't keep it out.
Marcus Rashford earns Manchester United a huge advantage in the Europa League away semi-final against Celta de Vigo with a sublime free kick. All this and more later on at 10:40. Should we get to the sport? For now, it is back to Elvis. We'll give you the menu for the day.
Thank you, Kendall. Now, 3 former presidents and a deputy president have gathered in Parktown here in Johannesburg to discuss the general crisis facing South Africa. Former presidents F.W. de Klerk, Thabo Mbeki, Kgalema Motlanthe, and the deputy president Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka are aiming to provide a safe, non-partisan platform for South Africans of all races to confront the crisis in political governance, the toxic political environment, and state of the economy. We'll go there live in a short while as soon as we establish that link. You don't want to miss it. Top story now, the ANC says it hopes that President Jacob Zuma will appeal yesterday's High Court judgment ordering him to give reasons for his firing of Pravin Gordhan as the finance minister and other cabinet ministers. The North Gauteng High Court judge Bashir Valley has ordered the president to disclose the reasons within 5 working days. The ANC has called the judgment a dangerous precedent. Party spokesperson Zizi Kodwa says the court's ruling disregarded the separation of powers between the judiciary, the executive and the legislative arm of government.
Considered the premier networking session that brings together politicians, business and captains of industry, this year's WEF on Africa takes place in Durban. The forum comes at a time when the continent is faced with poverty and joblessness. Africa's population is becoming restless, something leadership says it's aware of.
The youth, in particular, have been very clear in calling for leaders to address issues of exclusion, inequality, poverty, and unemployment.
The WEF founder urged African leaders to prepare their youth to embrace the fourth industrial revolution.
I would argue that the dividing line of the future is not anymore between left and right. It is between those who embrace the future, embrace the new opportunities, embrace openness.
Delegates have all agreed that a better future is possible if opportunities that exist are utilized. The role of young people and skills development have been highlighted as crucial in driving global economic growth. For a continent like Africa, which has a youthful population, this will be an advantage. Mzwande Lembej, SABC News, Durban.
Now, that was the World Economic Forum on Africa that will end in Durban today with a call to include young people in the mainstream economy and close that gap between the rich and the poor. As you know, at least 10 African leaders and hundreds of business leaders from across the continent have been attending that forum, and President Jacob Zuma has urged Africa and the rest of the world to pay attention to the needs of the youth. And of course, that's why we're asking you that question today, of course, that we want to find out from you. Are we ready for the fourth industrial revolution? Our youth and our people, do we have the skills to contend with that? And how do we deal with that? That is our question today for you. Please let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on the Facebook page. Let me know what's on your mind. As you know, we want to check with you. Let's now go to the dialogue where the 3 presidents and a deputy president is addressing the crowd. As you know, as you can see there, it's a moment of silence before the event begins. We have the 3 former presidents that will be addressing that particular dialogue here in Parktown, Johannesburg, talking about the issues at hand and have an inclusive South Africa. There they are coming through now. I can see former President F.W. de Klerk in the lead there, as well as Kgalema Motlanthe just behind him. I can't see President Thabo Mbeki as yet, but as you can see, they're filling into the room. There comes President Mbeki in the background there. There's a hand clap for the presidents as they enter the room. It will be a dialogue today. And there is Mr. Buthelezi also there, joining the fray with the former presidents walking towards the podium, and they'll be addressing the crowd there. The National Foundation for Dialogue Initiative, that is what it's called. It's happening today right here in our own backyard in Johannesburg in Parktown. Let's go there live.
We welcome the presidents and we ask them to remain standing while we will sing the national anthem.
Nkosi sikeleli Afrika maluphakanyisa uphondo lwayo Mithandazo yethu Nkosi sikelela thina lusapho lwayo Murena buluka sitshaba sa Yesu Ufedise dintwa le matshwenye Usibuluke sitshaba sa Yesu sitshaba sa South Africa South Africa die blauw van ons hemel die diepte van ons see oorwewige gebergte waar die kranse antwoord gee sound and call to come together and united we shall stand. Let us live and strive for freedom in South Africa, our land.
Thank you. You can be seated. It gives me great pleasure to call to the stage Ms. Nomhle Kanka of the Luthuli Foundation, but also chairman of the reference group of the National Dialogue Foundation Initiative. Nomhle.
Good morning. I welcome you all on behalf of the National Foundation's Dialogue Initiative. I hope that you've arrived this morning in good humor and light spirits, despite the weighty topic of the day's agenda. My name is Nomhle Kanka. You'll find that throughout the day, I will be asking for your indulgence on quite a number of things. And this is the first of many requests. I'm feeling a bit nostalgic. And I've wanted the opportunity to say this again. So I'm going to welcome you in a different sort of way. I'm going to welcome you with good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. Because I haven't heard that in so long. I'm missing one of our morning talk show hosts who used to welcome us all that way. This is the first dialogue of the National Foundation's Dialogue Initiative. The name says it all. We want to operate on a national basis. We are a coalition of foundations, and we are driving a dialogue initiative. I would like to acknowledge our hosts, which are all the foundations that are part of the NFDI. That is the Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation, the Helen Suzman Foundation, the Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe Trust, the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation, the F.W. de Klerk Foundation, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the Mlambo Foundation, and the Jakes Gerwel Foundation. I'd also like to have a special welcome and acknowledgement for the 3 honorable presidents that we have before us today. Former President de Klerk, former President Mbeki, and former President Motlanthe. I think that I speak for the nation, and certainly the people that are present in this room, when we say that we are humbled by the presence of all 3 of you at this one auspicious occasion. I think that it's also important for us to recognize where we are at this moment in time. And maybe that's why we have the 3 presidents who could come to, former presidents who could come together now. This is a special moment in South Africa's history. Actually, it's a moment that none of us in 1994 thought we would ever have to experience or require. And special moments are actually a matter of 2 components. One is about timing, and the other one is a sense of presence or awareness. In terms of timing, I don't think that there's any question about the fact that some unforeseeable and unexpected things have taken place in the history of our democracy. And at some point, these undesirable events eventually culminate to a moment in time when citizens of this nation have to stand up and say, no more. Not in the name of our Constitution, not in the name of our democracy, and certainly not in our name as citizens of this country. These are the matters that got the 8 foundations that are part of the NFDI 2 years ago to start talking to each other, which makes the subject of timing rather interesting. I've heard a number of people say this past week that the timing of this particular dialogue was placed perfectly. I can't say that the NFDI can take credit for that, because we've been talking to each other and planning an event of this nature for 2 years. But for whatever reason, call it spiritual, call it cosmic, the stars have aligned and have brought us to this particular moment in time, and for that, we are grateful to God that we are able to find each other in this particular manner. The program for today, which will be shown on the screen, is actually very straightforward. The purpose of the dialogue is not for members of the foundation alone to talk to you or for us to talk to each other, but it's actually to have an interaction between the foundations and the people that have been invited to be a part of this auspicious occasion. And what should be understood by the presence of the presidents, the former presidents, is that we have been guided to this point in time by the history that has been laid in front of us by these 3 former presidents. And it must be an awful troubling thing for them, given the effort and the sacrifice that they have made, their sacrifice amongst the sacrifices of many citizens of this country, both with us today and already past. It must be a very troubling thing for them to find us in our democratic development at such a retarded state. Let me repeat that. It must be a challenge after 23 years of democracy to find South Africa at such a retarded state. What we know about making a democracy work is that, yes, we must have very strong judicial institutions. Yes, we must have very active and informed parliamentary structures. Yes, we must have very, very well-equipped structures of government culminating in the office of the presidency. But what we also need is a level of active citizenship. We need a level of educated literacy in the democratic process. And what the foundations discussed back in 2014 is that the role of the citizen in the protection of this democracy and in the protection of the Constitution has not grown and developed to the point that it should. In fact, all those areas of government are accountable and responsible to the citizen, and the citizen of this country needs to hold those three structures to account. We in the National Foundations Dialogue Initiative wanted to start a process of encouraging those citizens to become engaged with their democratic structures and to demand more from their government than they've currently received. We hope to hear more about that subject from the presidents this morning. I'd like to take care of a few administrative or housekeeping issues. We're going to be led by 4 facilitators this morning who will be leading various discussions and making introductions. One you've already met, Dr. Tiens Elof, seated at my far left there. Prof. Bani Pichani, sitting next to him. Also Jackie Surobe, who is part of the facilitations group. And then lastly, Nana Ngobesi, who will join them at the table shortly. Each of these people represent Dr. Elof, the de Klerk Foundation, Prof. Pichani, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, Jackie Suroke, the Robert Sobukwe Foundation, and Nana Ngobesi, the Albert Luthuli Foundation. Also, by the way of housekeeping, I would ask that we each check our phones and ensure that it's on silent. I know we're very important people, but it will be disruptive to the proceedings if we don't place it on silent. The ablution facilities are through the far door to my right, and they're ladies and men's facilities on each side of the lift. I'm afraid that you will have to go through the security check again to come back in, so you will make a complete circle. And lastly, for those people, for those addicts amongst us who must get their nicotine fix, there are balconies to the end of this room beyond the coffee and teas that you received this morning where you can get your regular fix of nicotine. I see we don't have the program up, Collins. Most of you have already gone through registration. It will now be the job of Dr. Elof to introduce the presidents and begin our engagement with them. Thank you very much. Sorry, Jackie Surobe.
Thank you very much. It's Becky Soroka. My job is very easy because I'm introducing to you heads of states that you already know. Without much ado, I'd like to call on President F.W. de Klerk to make a contribution.
Madam Chair, ladies and gentlemen, I regard our conference here today as one of the most important and hopeful developments in recent years. It is enormously significant that foundations that were established by former national leaders from across the political spectrum have come together today to discuss the future of our beloved country. And I'm honored to share the platform with my two former colleagues, President Mbeki and President Motlanthe. The timing could also not be more appropriate. South Africa is in the grip of the most serious challenges that have confronted it since the establishment of our non-racial constitutional democracy 23 years ago. Our economy is in a more parlous condition than at any time since 1994. We are experiencing an unprecedented constitutional crisis. We are also beset by serious social challenges. There is no doubt that we need a new national dialogue to discuss these pressing challenges. We need a dialogue that will include South Africans from across the political, ethnic, and economic spectrums of the nations, because a few things are certain. The future of all South Africans and of all our children for decades to come is being threatened by the current challenges. There will be no solutions if we do not achieve win-win outcomes for all South Africans, and particularly for the most disadvantaged 40% of our population. And our problems can be resolved only if we work together. We need to discuss our economy. Here, surprisingly enough, I agree with President Zuma that we need radical economic transformation. We need, ladies and gentlemen, to transform radically the situation where almost 40% of the population languishes in unemployment and hopeless poverty. We need to transform radically our approach to investment. Instead of frightening off local and foreign investors with undisguised attacks on property rights, we should be doing everything we can to persuade them to help us create jobs and to unlock South Africa's enormous economic potential. We need to transform our attitude towards the appointment of people to key positions in the state and parastatals. In the appointment and promotion of people, merit needs to be taken into account properly while moving forward as rapidly as possible to the representativity required by the Constitution. We need to transform radically our approach to endemic corruption that is draining our resources and inhibiting growth and investment. We need to re-establish effective corruption-busting units like the Scorpions. We need a national prosecuting authority that will prosecute those who break the law without fear, favor, or prejudice. We need to transform radically the current situation in which our labor relations are regarded as amongst the worst in the world. We must ensure a fairer balance between labor, management, and government, and work together to produce greater value for all. What we don't need is the type of racially divisive and economically catastrophic radical economic transformation that is being touted by Professor Chris Malikane, the advisor of our latest Minister of Finance. He wants to apply in South Africa the same policies that the Chavistas imposed in Venezuela and that have led not only to the collapse of Venezuela's economy, but also to the erosion of its democracy. And then we need to discuss the constitutional crisis in which we find ourselves. There is nothing wrong with our constitution. The problems that confront us do not arise from the structure or framework of the Constitution. It arises from our failure to observe its guiding values and to embrace its principles. The core problem is that our President is not carrying out his duties in terms of Section 83 of the Constitution. He is not upholding, defending, and respecting the letter and spirit of the Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic. And he is not promoting the unity of the nation and that which will advance the Republic. The President has undermined the independence of the Chapter 9 institutions and organs of government, including the intelligence services, the National Prosecuting Authority, and the Hawks. He has not ensured their impartiality or their duty to exercise their powers and perform their functions without fear, favor, or prejudice. And then there are persistent reports supported by the former public protector and the courts that state-owned enterprises are being routinely abused to promote the personal and financial interests of some leaders and their families and associations. All this has become known as state capture. However, ladies and gentlemen, as SABC Jonas recently pointed out, it goes further than state capture. It's a coup. As he put it, and I quote, "You have a country being stolen in front of our own eyes. We are facing a coup via the very capture of the state." Apart from the Chapter 9 institutions and government agencies, Parliament was supposed to provide another safeguard against abusive and unconstitutional executive action. However, it has failed to carry out its very oversight role, primarily because MPs are accountable to their political bosses and not to the electorate. Accordingly, I believe we need to discuss the implementation of the recommendations of the Van Zyl-Slabbert Commission to ensure that MPs owe their first loyalty to the electorate and not to their political
on the part of citizenry leads to the corrosive undertow that eats away at the vitals of a society. At the same time, it is a kind of question that assumes even more importance in view of the historicity of the dialogic experience upon which South Africa in its current incarnation was conceived. In consequence, a legitimate question that cries out for an honest answer would be, given the instrumentality of dialogue in reimagining our new nation, what has since happened? Related to that would be the question, why has a discordant cacophony of noises emerged in the social space hardly 2 decades after CODESA? In other words, why does South Africa need a national dialogue today, 23 years into democracy, as if it was never there? We are raising these questions not because the current jarring public discourse is necessarily undesirable. After all, we should have neither prescription nor proscriptions for democratic encounter at the societal level. Except for unconstitutional register, there are no limits to permissible discourse short of undermining freedom of speech. What these questions aim to elevate is the all-important issue of critical engagement, not only among South Africans, but between citizens and the government of the day. Without this continued critical high-level dialogic engagement among citizens and between the citizens and government, a phenomenon known as democracy deficit effectively creeps in. Democracy deficit, therefore, reflects the absence of a national culture of critical consciousness represented by a multiplicity of ideas, debates, and a questioning attitude towards those elected to steer us forward as a nation. At the heart of democracy deficit is the lack of accountability to the citizenry by those carrying the electoral mandate, thus hollowing out democracy of its essentials by reducing it to pro forma status. Political life in such a state is such that the act of violating the Constitution, which amounts to an ultimate profanity against our very mode of existence, is reduced to banality. Under these conditions, democracy is narrowed down to the mechanical exercise of voting. While the act of voting is a democratic expression, it is only meaningful if, along with a constellation of other practices, it is subordinated to both reflective and ethical considerations by society. After all, it is the electoral mandate given to public representatives which constitutes a platform on which those who hold political office are expected to deliver on their mandate and thereby ameliorate the totality of our social, economic, and political experience. Necessarily, the spatial vacuum created by democracy deficit leads to a form of political theology whereby the only existing political discourse is the one sanctioned from on high. Averse to criticism, such anointed discourse commandeers moral high ground on account of claims of history and therefore delegitimizes any counter-discourse inimical to the abiding interests of its representatives. In such a case, political leadership sees itself as exempted from the norms and standards to which it perfunctorily and routinely subjects society at large. This will explain the prevalent culture of impunity that sees the violation of our Constitution as an inconvenient but trifling matter. Political leadership simply substitutes itself for the masses. It sees itself as standing over and above due process. This recalls the imperishable thought of Gerald Massey that, and I quote, "They must find it difficult, those who took authority as truth, rather than the truth as authority," close quote. Such aberrations as taking authority as truth only happen when the country's citizens withdraw into themselves without caring to listen to the hum of daily politics. Program Director, once again, the question that confronts us today as post-apartheid society is, why does South Africa need national dialogue? My take is that the consequences of having none are too ghastly to contemplate in a post-apartheid, post-colonial setting where the deformity of our historically defined ethical identity is all too real. Unfortunately, we have, as ordinary South Africans, allowed this possibility to exist. The construction of a new political reality for our country, expressed through our world-acclaimed constitution as the bedrock of our system of democracy, may have very well lulled us into false state of self-satisfaction. Perhaps what we tend to forget in the excitement of the historical moment is that we are human, all too human, which means that we are no exception to the all too ubiquitous shortcomings that inhere in the human condition. Of course, we have still been alive to the urgent task of advancing our strategic goal, that is to build a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and just society, a task which we knew would be ongoing across generations. Similarly, our focus to address the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality never fizzled out of our collective consciousness. Our biggest oversight as a people lied in thinking that political leadership alone, on the strength of democratic mandate, would respond to these historical imperatives without falling prey to the temptations of power. Our system of democracy itself was modeled on the central assumptions that the ethically impeccable leadership model represented by the figure of President Nelson Mandela would continue to be the pivot on which would revolve leadership as society steamed on into the future. In such cases, societies let down their guard until, as seems to be the case now, they are shaken out of stupor by the turbulence of the historical process. At times, reaction during such seminal moments turns out to be too little too late. This is all the reason we should welcome the National Foundation's Dialogue Initiative. It is a timely idea. Its momentousness resides in the realization that something profoundly wrong is simmering in the very annals of our time. Only those who chose not to would fail to appreciate the progressive degeneracy of the culture of our national politics, along with the concomitant questions this poses for the cohesive vision predicative of our nation. This is how this gathering today becomes a national call. It seeks to be a turning point in the way the people of our country relate to the political process. It is only the beginning. We may see this as replanting of the seeds that must, with time, sprout into life for all seasons. Their blossoming will be forever a reminder that history should not repeat itself, lest we lapse into the same historical errors. The moral failings of our day cannot be allowed to calcify into irreversible reality. If we allowed this unwholesome character of politics to continue while we wallow in silence, history would never forgive our generation. We would have been complicit in an act of betrayal. We would have learned nothing from history. On this point about history, Frederick Douglass is worth quoting for the lesson he drives home. Douglass contains the following, and I quote, "What actually happened in the past does not really change, of course, but the questions we choose to ask of the past change, and thereby new interpretations emerge. This is what is meant by learning something new from or about the past. The questions change and thus yield new understandings. This is why, as historians often say, each generation must write its own history," close quote. The questions we ask of the past are as much relevant to the present, and that is how we learn from history. I am sure we will also appreciate that history writing is not only through pen and paper, but our actions as common people, understanding the socio-historical essence of dialogue as a transgenerational imperative that shaped and continues to shape the soul of our nation. And I thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, we also invited former Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo Muka. She's on international duty and could not be here with us, but we will use a method of communication from her side. She works for the United Nations organization, and I think we're all familiar with her wonderful work, both at Mlambo Foundation and in the past that she has done. She's a champion of the liberation of women, and young women in particular. And she's doing this wonderful work all over the country. Thank you.
To share my views and to be part of this inaugural dialogue in my capacity as a citizen of our wonderful country. We are undertaking a much-needed journey with the nation to be in dialogue and to talk amongst ourselves. Amongst many positive attributes of our country and lessons learned from our collective history, there are three that stand up for me right now. The standing of our struggle heroes, whose value system gave us a moral compass that informed some of the important aspects enshrined in our Constitution. The concept of Ubuntu, the ability to negotiate and achieve a sufficient consensus for all to feel heard and to feel included. All three have contributed to the creation of a country we have been proud of, a country that put people first. All three helped to shape shared values that resonated so widely with all those who identified with the Liberation Project and with many all over the world, people of goodwill who adopted Ubuntu. Our leaders held themselves to a higher standard, and they were beyond reproach. This made our struggle credible and our cause just. With Ubuntu again, our people helped to create a narrative that explained human solidarity to us as a nation. There are many around the world who have also embraced this term and appropriated it for themselves and for their struggles. Our tradition of Indaba, Lekgotlas, Bosberad, the way we handled CODESA and the Constituent Assembly, achieving sufficient consensus, all this makes us a people who dialogue. All three feed into a tremendous, positive, shared history that is defining for South Africa, and it is to be cherished. So where do we stand now? We are now in need of a leadership that can help us to restore the values that we have been losing. We need role models for this, and we need society at all levels to engage and to pull ourselves together. We need to return to the South Africa that is envisaged in our Constitution. We need leaders who serve instead of being served, and to restore Ubuntu to be part of the guiding principles for our nation. We are deeply in need of dialogue, where dissent is not seen as contentious. Youth and women have played an important and a positive role in our discourse. The women in our country and women in many parts of the world, including countries in conflict, are often a catalyst for change, able to stand for peace and reconciliation when nations tear themselves apart. Basadi, Batswara Tipa Gabuhali, in defense of the weak and the indigent. we fight for justice. We need to occupy that space again in our country, more decisively and deliberately. We must not hand over a divided, demoralized, unscrupulous country to the next generation, where there is mediocrity and greed. Instead, let us strive for excellent, ubuntu and batupili. Who stands to lose most if we do not find our way? The masses of our people who are still battling poverty and those who deserve and need services will lose. When we deliver those services, it is not a favor that we dispense, but a right that people must have. We must not expect to be thanked or rewarded, or even reward ourselves for doing our jobs, just as we cannot reward a fish for swimming. The women and girls who live and experience violence will lose when the institutions that are supposed to show zero tolerance to any form of violation of rights are themselves in crisis. The rights of women and those who have overcome many challenges are eroded when we fail to respect our Constitution and its values. When racism from all sides and xenophobia rears its ugly head, we all lose. That is why this is the time for dialogue. We need to restore decorum in Parliament. It is time for introspection and correctional action in the best interest of our society, for our hard-won freedom. From the current generation must not also lose out on the benefits of freedom, and the next generation must also cherish the freedom. We must dialogue towards a non-sexist, non-racist, democratic, and corruption-free South Africa. Thank you.
I'm acknowledging the presence of the former presidents and the prominent persons we have here and other foundations that are here. I'm just going to deal with the question and answer after I've made this short announcement. And there's a lady by the name Asanda Makaka, to whom I'm going to be referring the other foundations. She's right there at the back. If you can look at her hand, there she is, Asanda. She's raising her hand. I'm actually raising her so that she's able to take the names of the other foundations that are not on the list, who have been given an opportunity to make short statements that will be read after the 8 foundations have made their presentations just after tea. But we are going to start with a question and answer session right now. But one thing that I would also like to acknowledge is the presence of the eminent persons we have amongst us, who also have an opportunity to just give a 1-minute statement, because this forum is about ordinary people who want to make their voice heard. So we are going to reduce the time because we are running a little bit out of time. We have Mr. Serote here, Ambassador Thandi Luthuli Xabashe, Sheila Sisulu, Silo Makeka Kancube, Nonkululeko Koboto, Mukoni Rachitanga, Molo Mzwandile, Mlapo Kobela, Menzimbata, the Honorable Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, Auditor General Kimi Tembekile Makwetu, sorry, Kitumetsi Gwangwa, sorry, Kalim Rajab, Jonas Gwangwa, Joel Nachitenze, Yani Evans or Jenny Evans, Hassan Mohammed, Dr. Rampele, Aziz Pahad, Ambassador Thandi Rankwe, Lindiwe Mabuza, Ambassador Supamloi, Ambassador George Nene, and Ewe Adande. Amongst the foundations, we are aware that we have Save SA as one of the foundations that are here, And I'm so glad that Ms. Pumzile Mlambo mentioned the women. We have Sawid also represented here. They also have to make a short statement that will be read after the foundations. If there are any other foundations that are here, please go and see Asanda Makaka so she's able to put you on the program right after the other foundations have spoken. Now, I'm going to deal with the question and answer session. And it may sound very unfair, but the media will have their opportunity to talk to the former presidents around lunchtime. They have their time set aside. So we are going to open the platform. Mainly, the questions will be coming from other people other than the media that we actually have here. I think that will be fair. Shall I have a few questions? I'll start with probably 3 questions on my right, and then I'll deal with the other 3 questions on my left. I think we have a roving micro here. Are there any questions that come from people other than the ones who are in the media? I cannot see. There's the light that's coming straight to my face.
No, thanks very much. My name is Sunny Boy Similan.
If any.
I'm an activist. I came here as an activist. The question that I wanted to ask is informed by the book that I've just recently read by Dr. Kulumbata that says during the CODESA period, there was no focus on the economy or the economic transformation. I just wanted to ask the presidents that are there that
I see.
Come again? That what is that we miss out, or can they confirm that? And what is that needs to be done? Thanks. Bye.
Good morning to the panel and the dignitaries. I humble myself before you. I have a question for the whole of... Oh, my name is Naledi Mwabelo. Are we really and honestly living in a democratic country where everybody is equal regardless of your rank in society? Or is this democracy just a place where the underprivileged people dream and hope for? Thank you.
Okay. One more question. Young man with a gray shirt.
Thank you very much. My name is Kenneth Mokhatla. I'm from the PAC. During the President F.W. de Klerk's speech, he talked about the race question, and he also pointed out about Professor Chris Malikan. But given our history, I want to ask him what is his take about the wealth redistribution, because he's only pointing out about the racial divisions, but he's not saying on how do black people get to benefit in the new dispensation. Thank you very much.
Yes, we'll come back to the podium here and throw the question to the floor. Shall we start with you, sir?
Well, let me say about the first question.
Oh, we got
the
this thing.
microphone working. Let me say about the first question. I think we did address the economy, although not in a very specific way in the constitutional negotiations. The property clause is an essential aspect of economic security for investors, and the property clause therefore has an economic basis. I think the clauses about allowing the concept of something like fair discrimination relates to the economic divides arising from the wrongs of apartheid, and that therefore there should be a form of affirmative action, although the words are not used in the Constitution, but the issue of fair discrimination, allow affirmative action and black economic empowerment in a balanced manner. That is what the Constitution prescribes. The issue of representativity in the civil service has an economic basis. So I disagree with the writer of the book to say we have neglected the economy in the constitutional negotiations, but maybe President Mbeki can bear me out on that. With regard to the specific question addressed to me, no, the wealth distribution is not in a good state. But how do you repair it? Not by just cutting the existing relatively small cake up in a different way. The best way to get a better wealth distribution is to bake a bigger cake. And to bake a bigger cake, you need investment. And to get investment, you need investor confidence. And to have investor confidence, you need to organize your economy on the basis that investors can be sure of profit, can be sure of security of their investment. And all that flies in the face of what the professor is advocating. As far as the young questioner is concerned, yes, we have a democracy, but it's not very healthy at the moment.
And he has asked for some of the other presidents to assist in answering questions.
Go on, Chief.
Well, you know, as a general point, the system of capitalism, and we live in that system in South Africa, is very good at wealth creation, but it is very, very poor in working out how that wealth should be equitably distributed. That's a fundamental flaw of this system of capitalism, that it can create enormous wealth, but the distribution side is always lagging far behind the wealth creation. And that's what gives rise to the fundamental contradiction in society. It leads to situations where, you know, the top 1% in society controls almost 90% of the wealth of the country. And that's what creates poverty, that's what creates social upheavals, because indeed those who are wallowing in wealth end up having to raise the walls, the perimeter walls around their properties to keep the poor out. But you know, the idea of democracy is that we should be able to create a far much more equitable system of distribution of wealth.
I think we can go on and take more questions, Mr. President. We can.
No. With regard to the CODESA negotiations, I think what, I'm sure Kulumbata would have raised this. The central point was to end the political system of apartheid and institute a democracy. This is what is at the heart of the negotiations. And so so that's what the negotiations were about. The matter about what are the practical steps to take to transform South Africa. Here's the Constitution, as President de Klerk has just said. Here's the Constitution which provides for all sorts of things, including addressing the legacy of the past. I'm saying as part of the process of ensuring that we end the political system of apartheid and bring into being a democratic system. It's the heart of the negotiations, quite what Kulumbata would expect about what happens in economic negotiations. I don't quite know. I'm not quite sure what that means, how you would do it. A government comes, elections take place in terms of the constitution. Government comes into power. And it's for the government to say, this is what we propose should be done in order to change the constitution for the better. But I think the point that has been made about the constitution surely recognizes the fact that we needed to address this legacy that we're inheriting. Now, yes, indeed, we're a democratic society. But what the young lady was asking is perfectly correct. We still remain an unequal society. That's why for all of these years, we've always said a central task is the eradication of the legacy of colonialism and apartheid. Now, I want to come back to what we've met here to do. It was not to interview the three of us about all sorts of things. It was to begin the process of a national dialogue. And it's exactly these questions that are being posed which must become part of that discussion in the national dialogue. What is it that we need to do in order to end the inequality to which the young lady referred? The economy, as President Mutlantes just said, a capitalist economy, has the features that he explained. How do we address this matter of ensuring that you deal with this issue about wide disparities, inequalities in terms of wealth and income? That must be part of the discussion in the national dialogue. And the question is not easy to resolve. I know there are all sorts of texts and books and articles that are written about this. But in the practice, I'm saying it's not easy to resolve. President de Klerk, for instance, raised this question about investment. One of the challenges we have here is that historically, for whatever the reason, we don't save enough. You can't invest, build a factory, build a road, do whatever, without capital. And so you must answer the question, where does this capital come from? Clearly, we are not generating sufficient capital in the country to be able to address our challenges. Even if you look at China, yeah, I'm about to finish. Look at China. Rapid development. The reason the Chinese said in the late 70s, let's have an open door policy, is because they were themselves not generating sufficient capital. So it attracted from the rest of the world. So I'm saying those are questions that must come up in the national dialogue. So rather than these questions being asked to us outside of this context, I think that's not correct.
Right. Before I continue taking more questions, I need to add to the list of the prominent persons who can actually make a statement. I understand we have Mr. Jeff Khadebe here. We have Prof. Mahoba. We have Mam Zanele Mbeki. I needed to mention that she worked with us in Sawit, my favorite organization. But above that, the very Mr. Dr. Kulumbata that was actually mentioned in these questions is amongst us. Thank you so much. And continue to take some more questions this side. Yes, sir.
Madam Facilitator. My name is George Lindeque. I'm here from Johannesburg. I'd like to pose a question to the presidents, please, and then venture an answer, and I would like them to respond or comment if they do not mind. President Mbeki made the point that the rose is ill or sick. My question then is, how do we heal the rose? How do we get it healthy again? And my venture of an answer is, our presidents and the other leaders in the country created a constitution for us, a political settlement, but I believe we need other initiatives too. We need an initiative to create an emotional settlement amongst ourselves in all South Africans. Secondly, so that then once we have the emotional settlement, we can develop a social and economic settlement. Thank you, Madam Facilitator.
Thank you, Madam. I'm Henry Matthys from the Western Cape, affiliated to Freedom Park and also to the School for Public Leadership at the University of Stellenbosch. My question is also to the three of you. We are talking about a constitution that's just. Don't the three of you feel that you have omitted one of the very important groups of our people, the First Nations, and that both three of you are guilty of neglecting their rights as far as the land issue is concerned? That the economic development of that people should be of prime importance in dialogues like this. I sit in many conferences where we are discussing the future of our country, and every time I realize that the Khoi and the San people are not part of the future development ideas and concepts of our nation. Don't you think that all three of you, whilst you were Deputy President, Mr. de Klerk, Mr. McClantley, and Mr. Mbeki, you people did not give the rightful recognition to that people? And how can we build a just South Africa if you don't allow them now to come to the table and be regarded as full citizens and be responding to their rights?
Good morning, dignitaries. My name is Naledi Marobela, and I'm from Midrand High School. My question is, how does the current leadership motivate the youth of today in order for us to build a future generation fulfilled with social development, economic growth, and non-racism? And how do you plan on involving more of the youth in these dialogues, as we are the future? Thank you.
I don't know how to answer questions.
Thank you
like
so
that.
much. I think we'll open the podium to the presidents
Let
for them
them
to
start
answer.
this time.
I've been asked to start from the right. Yes.
There's an issue raised about a moral something.
Emotional settlement.
Emotional settlement. I'm terribly sorry. I wouldn't know how to comment on that, because what is if our colleague could be more specific about it, it would be possible to respond to this emotional thing. But while we're waiting for that, the issue that's raised about the Khoi and the San, I want us to come back to the issue of why we have met here today. And I agree entirely with you. If you were to say part of the national dialogue must be to address the challenges of addressing the interests of the Khoi and the San. Let's not to talk about the history about what happened. Because I can tell you what the government did in terms, for instance, about land settlements for the Khoi people, which we did. I was there personally, and we handed over land to them, and so on. There are problems about that particular settlement, because then other problems arose. But I think we should say, let this discussion about the Khoi and the San be part of the national dialogue. And I think that would be correct. The thing about bringing up of the youth and integration of the youth is very important. And again, I would like to say, I would hope that all of us, the foundations, would really go out of their way to make sure that the youth participate in the dialogue. Because I think it's in the course of their involvement in terms of determining the future of the country that you will have this development that the young lady was talking about. I think that's the central issue.
Indeed.
Then there was the emotional thing.
That's it.
Yeah. like all soft things, Madam Facilitator, emotional is a very difficult issue. What I mean when I talk about emotional settlement is that we have healed the past. We have healed ourselves in respect of the past. That has not yet happened. My view is, and our view is, when I say our, Mampila and I, is that once we have that, we will be at peace with one another and we would have dealt with the past.
Thank you, sir. I think they got that. Anyone ready to venture into that?
I delegate it to the President. Kalima here.
Well, thank you very much. Professor Keurapeti Kositsile is a poet. And in one of his poems, he writes past, present, future as one word. And he says, past, present, future is always now. And so, in dealing with problems that were occasioned by the past, we must always be mindful of the fact that we're addressing them in the here and now as a way of laying down a foundation for the future. So the three are always together. I remember that President Nelson Mandela established the moral regeneration movement, and he mandated it to deal with what he called the RDP of the soul, which I think is very close to what you are raising about, you know, the healing as the Constitution enjoins us to address the disabilities of the past and also to heal the wounds created by our immediate past. Now, I want to come to the issue of the Khoi and the San and the Korana and the Griqua, the Nama people in South Africa in relation to the land. I happen to be part of a high-level panel established by the Speakers Forum, and we've done outreach programs throughout all provinces, and these communities came forward to raise their claim to land and so on. But they are not the only ones. Many other communities came forward to raise the question of the land. And as a panel, we are at a point where we think we would be able to come up with recommendations of how the land question should be addressed without creating any problems to anybody, but that as South Africans, it is possible for us to address that question once and for all, because many communities in rural areas were never ever issued with title deeds. They were given what is called permission to occupy certificates, which don't serve as a commercial instrument, which essentially means that they were excluded from participating in the mainstream economy because land is an asset. I think by end of August, the panel will be able to finalize its report and present it and make it public so that the recommendations, in my view, will be able to help the country to address the issue of land reform, land distribution and restitution, all of those questions.
Thank you, sir.
I know you're running out of time, so I acquiesce. I think the questions have been adequately dealt with by my two colleagues. I would just like to underline, in this dialogue, it's very important that we give a proper role and place and opportunity to the youth.
Thank you so much. I'll take another set of questions. Again, I would like to...
Oops.
Thank you, facilitator, and indeed honored to be able to ask the question. Just as an observation, as we sit here, I'm struck by how we, as a population, feel marginalized and disempowered to deal with the challenges that face us. And struck also by three past presidents who seem to feel that as well. And many, many leaders here who seem to really sense that frustration. We've got a crisis. The incredible phrase used earlier by President Motlanthe, something profoundly wrong, simmering in the annals of our time. And we're all marginalized. So the question is, does a dialogue initiative fix that? Is something maybe not more by the way of a strong activism needed? Does a dialogue initiative fix that? We seem to be, with the current leadership of our country, outmaneuvered every time. You know, those in power have an incredible ability to just outmaneuver those who are of goodwill. Those who are of evil will have outmaneuvered us. And does a dialogue initiative fix that disempowered problem? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone present here today, our former state presidents and our VIPs, all protocol observed. My name is Pilang Mashaba. My question to our panel is, how do we get back to the values and principles endorsed in our Constitution in 1994? But also, I'd like to say that in terms of our current leadership, or rather the problems that we're facing today, is how do we define governance? For me, governance is an oversight process of effective and efficient governance for stakeholders, which the stakeholders are the citizens of this country. But we're sitting here today and we've been failed. We've been failed, and therefore people that will suffer the most are the children in Khayelitsha, in Gugulethu, in Alexandra, and so forth. So what do we say about the governance? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mohau Busiu. I'm just an active citizen. President Motlanthe spoke about the capitalist class. And I think in 2006, President Mbeki, addressing the 4th annual Nelson Mandela lecture, he spoke about this development of the capitalist class in our society and how it has seamlessly embedded itself in our society and how we relate to one another. And at the heart of it is about the personal accumulation of wealth. And he had said, at whatever cost, it is about get rich, get rich, get rich. And I think it is the crisis in the leadership that we have today. But as he also spoke about the humane systems of society during his speech, I think what we should address also is about how we relate to one another. Things such as the role of the church in advancing the democratic project, and how the judicial service can also help us in this regard, and the role of the youth as well.
Thank you
Thanks.
so much. Before I ask them to answer the questions, I think I can be forgiven for focusing on the foundations, for giving an opportunity to write the statements. Other organizations that are here who would like to make the short statements are actually given the same opportunity to do the same. My apologies about that. Shall we ask the eminent persons to answer the questions?
Well, can I, in reaction to the first question, say there's room for activism next to dialogue. We're not saying dialogue should replace activism, but this dialogue has as its grand aim, in my heart and mind, to build an ever-growing consensus about what is the right way forward for South Africa. This dialogue is about post-President Zuma. It's about post some of the burning pragmatic issues of the day. It is about building a consensus as we did 23 years ago about our Constitution and our constitutional future. It is about how do we find a way within the framework of the Constitution. How do we find a way to bring greater equality, to close that gap, to address the needs and the problems of that 40%? How do we more effectively fight corruption and all the things I've listed in my speech? So it's a grand, broad-based dialogue that we are trying to promote on this launching day here today. But there's room next to it for activism, there's room next to it for organizations to march, to protest, to do whatever they want to do. But there needs to come greater cohesion in the public discussion which we are having. And we hope that through this dialogue, that greater cohesion can be achieved.
Thank you.
Would you like to react to the other questions?
Go on.
The issue of governance, I think it's important in the sense that we need stability, political stability, if we are to make progress in our efforts of building an economy that would take care of the basic needs of all South Africans. Now, for that to happen, you therefore need a capable and stable state. And I want to take just 2 seconds to explain this. The state as distinct from government, because governments come and go every 5 years. Theoretically speaking, you may end up with a different government. But the state must be stable and capable. And what that means is that we must then have a system of appointing the most talented people to man or staff the state. And so we must avoid this high turnover at senior management level in government departments. Because each time there's a change of personnel, institutional memory is lost there. And you lose important skills. And therefore you end up with a state which is not stable, but unstable, where the rest of the junior managers or bureaucracy is unsure as to whether they will still have a job or not, simply because of this high turnover. So that's what we need. We need a stable state. In other countries, position of Director General is referred to as permanent secretary. And permanent precisely because they are meant to be there for a long time. We do have a good example in our government. Department of Science and Technology has had, where the same person serving as Director General, Dr. Phil Mjwaha, for years. And several ministers have been coming and going from that department. But the department itself, as a state, is stable. So what I'm saying is, government is the face of the state for a term at a time. And unless we attend to this question, I think we will forever have, it's very difficult when you have the political head on a steep learning curve and the senior managers on a steep learning curve and so on. So you need that stability. And it would then give rise to observance of the rule of law. Because, if you have impunity and disregard to the Constitution and the law, then, we mustn't expect taxi drivers to observe the road rules. So that's a sign of anarchy, if we allow that. And so it's important to have, a very stable and capable state.
Thank you, sir.
But to come, let's say, just to follow up on this matter that President Grant is just discussing now, then let's come back to, I'm terribly sorry to be insisting on this all the time, to remember why we have convened here. You see, this matter about governance has got to be part of the discussion in the national dialogue. That's what is more important rather than our own opinions about this matter. For instance, part of what must be discussed in the national dialogue is the issue of corruption, which affects us at all three spheres of government: national, provincial, and local. What do we as South Africans do about that? That's a question that we need to answer in the course of the dialogue. Because I'm quite certain that one of the things that we probably would find in the course of the dialogue, that people may know who is corrupt, but don't know where to report because they don't trust the state system. You see this thing, for instance, with regard to the police, where in some areas you find that people know who the criminals are, but they don't report to the police because they believe the police go and talk to the criminal to say this one has betrayed you. So I'm saying in the national dialogue we've got to discuss that, to say what is it that we do about this governance in its totality. I'm just giving an example of one point of entry, the corruption issue. I think President de Klerk has dealt with the matter about the activism and the dialogue. Indeed, I'm sure that none of us would want to say, don't act, wait until the outcome of the dialogue. Please act. But this national consensus we're talking about, we need to develop a national consensus about the challenges that the country faces. To say how do we unite the country to defeat poverty? It's a critically important thing that poverty affects too many people, again, as President de Klerk was saying. It's one of the national challenges. What is it that we do together to address this matter? What is it that we do to address inequality? I think that becomes part of this, of the national dialogue. I've forgotten what the third question was.
No,
I'm
don't
sorry.
you worry. I need to actually explain that all the discussions that are going to be held today and what has actually transpired will actually filter into what will be on the website, NFDI websites, everything that is actually being talked about. In that space, I think you'll be allowed also to ask further questions because this is about a dialogue as we're actually talking. So I'm going to be taking just 2 more questions. We're running out of time on this side because I've done this side. Right, okay.
Wano.
Thank you, Program Director. Introduce.
Yes, you introduce yourself and your organization.
I'm Glorious Robin. If this dialogue happened in 2014, my main thing there would have been big business. Where are they in helping us with taking the country forward? Basishiya nalento sodwa ngoku and kaloku inzima nakuthi. But so that question, I would still like it to be on board, that big business must help us with fixing the old history which they were a part of. I'm talking institutions, not people, that we are trying to fix still with business in it. I think they can help us fast track a whole lot of things. So that question, I would still like it to remain that they must be part of the dialogue.
Thank you.
Today, though, I have a different problem. People who have gone to school are useful in a dialogue and also in politics. And so the question there is, how do you integrate the intellectuals back to politics now? Because they are dislodged from that space, because the country belongs to everybody who, what is the word? To all who belong to it, who live in it. And in that sentence, there is intellectuals who they are also just as useful in having a political conversation in a manner that says that you can have these sustained conclusions that are required. The last point, I don't know if it's questions or not. We have to go home and tell our parents that there's remorse now. In a manner, though, that they don't lose respect for politicians, for government, because we won't be able to rescue that at the same time. But we need to tell them the truth. And kuna crisis, and that is why there's poverty. Kalok bebe utenga this bag of maize, they were buying it 3 years ago for 70 rands. Now they are paying 250 rands today.
Thank you so much.
That is what the economic crisis means to them.
Sure. We're taking just one more question. People are getting edgy with time.
Amandla. Okhuluma uJoseph Matundu, President wakwa AMCO. I-question endifuna ukuyitsho apha imfitshane. How can we guard against this dialogue initiative only to protect the gains of Captain Park, not looking at the current situation, and also not to reduce this dialogue initiative into a discussion, but to negotiate all the barriers of economic transformation? Because I do believe that we're in our slumber. For an example, the 2012 Marikana massacre, where the democratic state massacred 34 mine workers for economic transformation. Everyone was quiet except the individual as the citizens that were making noise. The foundation or institution were quiet about it. So then are we not just reactive because this current situation threatens our comfort zone? Thank you.
I know that there are other questions. I will permit the eminent persons to answer the questions. If people have further questions, as I pointed it out, we are going to have group sessions after lunch where we are going to discuss everything and other things that we have actually not mentioned up till this point. And all of that will be captured and put on our website after the event. I'm going to allow the eminent persons to answer. I don't know who's going to start first.
No, the foundations, indeed, the point that is raised by the president of AMCU is important. Indeed, we want the national dialogue to deal with current affairs, not to run away from anything. The challenge of the transformation of the economy so that it addresses these issues of poverty, inequality, and so on. This must be part of our agenda. So there's nothing that is off the agenda. As a nation, we must say, where were we yesterday? Where are we today with regard to everything? And what must we do? So absolutely, there wouldn't be any from the side of the foundation, any attempt to say there's anything that is excluded from the national dialogue. In particular, our current reality, including in the manner in which it expresses itself.
Thank you, sir.
The earlier comments were obviously correct. I think what Gloria was saying about we should try and ensure that big business becomes part of the national dialogue. Because even they have got questions to answer and maybe some proposals to make. And she was saying that the intelligentsia also needs to be brought into this process, as we must do the older people, when she was saying we must talk to our parents. So that even those various sections must be part of the national dialogue, and I think that we would all agree with that.
Thank you so much.
Can I just say, with regard to, there was a mention of protecting vested interests or something like that. The dialogue, and I think what all three of us have said, is not aimed at protecting specific interests per se. But a question which must be on the agenda is, to what extent must we ensure that there is investor confidence so that we can get the investments which can create the jobs, which can bring the economic growth, which is a prerequisite for alleviating the poverty problem, for alleviating the unemployment problem. Without economic growth, we cannot alleviate that problem. So we must ask ourselves, to what extent, not must we protect anybody, but to what extent must we inspire people to help us create the capacity to really bring about economic transformation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think we have come to the end of our question and answer to the eminent persons at the moment. I just need to correct something. You know, when you stand on the podium, you listen to everyone until you no longer hear what you're saying. The people who are given an opportunity to speak, some of them were just acknowledging their presence. They don't have to give the statements if they don't need to, but I think it was important for us to acknowledge their presence in this group. When we move from here, we are going to have tea, where we are going to just have a few nibbles. I'm not quite sure we're going to be given as much time as we have on the timetable, but we'll actually just notify people when it is time to come back. And I know those who need to see Asanda Makaka, some of them have already started going to it. I thank you very much.
You have those with three former presidents and a deputy president that have gathered in Parktown today in Johannesburg to discuss the general crisis facing South Africa in the National Foundation Forum Dialogue, which was coming to us live from Parktown, just around the corner from us here in Johannesburg. The former President F.W. de Klerk, Thabo Mbeki, as well as Kgalema Motlanthe, and the Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo Ngcuka were aiming to provide a safe, non-partisan platform for South Africa of all races to really confront the crisis of our political governance and the toxic political environment and the state of the economy. And that is the dialogue that's continued. But right now, let's come back to you and give you your headlines. Three former presidents and a deputy president call for urgent intervention in what they say is a crisis facing South Africa. Janus Wallush, the case has been postponed to May the 29th in the Supreme Court of Appeal. And judgment on the bail application of two Northwest men accused of killing a 16-year-old boy at Colini expected today. Now, that's what you can find in all the news, and we'll come back to you in a short while. But before we get there, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much. A very interesting morning we've got today. What all these people, all these venerable former leaders of South Africa speaking about the state of the nation and what they think should be happening. Very interesting stuff, made for a riveting view, I tell you. Now, good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today. The long-awaited selection of Bafana Bafana's coach has finally been made, and Stuart Baxter is the man in the hot seat.
It's a chicken or the egg. Do we get the support, then play well, or do we play well, then get the support? I think, we should be looking to give them something to shout about.
The McClumbys and company. McClumbey up into the area. Time for Malatina.
It's crunch time in the PSL as Bidvest Wits extend their lead at the top of the log with a 1-0 win against Pirates, and Mamelodi Sundowns salvage a 2-2 draw against Platinum Stars.
Mamelodi Sundowns are level, and it is Zachary.
You never know. Sometimes you're not happy with the point. Maybe we need that point. So, yeah. But to be honest, we should have won.
It will be Rashford to strike it. This time Alvarez can't keep it out.
And Marcus Rashford earns Manchester United a huge advantage in the Europa League away semi-final against Celta de Vigo with a sublime free kick. We'll be bringing all of this in more detail shortly. But for now, it is back to Elvis, who's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Former South African leaders have united in one voice in what they call is a worsening crisis faced by the country. Former President F.W. de Klerk attributed some of the problems facing the country to the current leadership undermining the country's constitution.
We need to discuss the constitutional crisis in which we find ourselves. There is nothing wrong with our constitution. The problems that confront us do not arise from the structure or framework of the constitution. It arises from our failure to observe its guiding values and to embrace its principles. The core problem is that our president is not carrying out his duties in terms of Section 83 of the Constitution. He is not upholding, defending, and respecting the letter and spirit of the Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic. And he is not promoting the unity of the nation and that which will advance the Republic. The President has undermined the independence of the Chapter 9 institutions and organs of government, including the intelligence services, the National Prosecuting Authority, and the Hawks. He has not ensured their impartiality or their duty to exercise their powers and perform their functions without fear, favor, or prejudice. And then there are persistent reports, supported by the former public protector and the courts, that state-owned enterprises are being routinely abused to promote the personal and financial interests of some leaders and their families and associations. All this has become known as state capture. However, ladies and gentlemen, as SABC Jonas recently pointed out, it goes further than state capture. It's a coup. As he put it, and I quote, "You have a country being stolen in front of our own eyes. We are facing a coup via the very capture of the state." Apart from the Chapter 9 institutions and government agencies, Parliament was supposed to provide another safeguard against abusive and unconstitutional executive action. However, it has failed to carry out its very oversight role, primarily because MPs are accountable to their political bosses and not to the electorate. Accordingly, I believe we need to discuss the implementation of the recommendations of the Van Zyl-Slabbert Commission to ensure that MPs owe their first loyalty to the electorate and not to their political bosses. This can be done by adopting appropriate national legislation and would not require any change to the present constitution. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, we need to discuss the serious social challenges confronting South Africa. We need an emergency national strategy to turn our education system around, to ensure that future generations of our children are not condemned to lives of unemployment and poverty.
Meanwhile, another former president, Thabo Mbeki, has called for an urgent intervention to what he refers to as a worsening crisis facing the country.
And after serious reflection, proceeding from their different positions, our national foundations have concluded that our country is immersed in a general and worsening crisis which impacts and will continue to impact negatively on our country and the rest of our continent, Africa. This is by no means to deny the significant progress in many areas that we have achieved during the years since 1994. Nevertheless, responding to our current reality, our foundations took the decisions that something has to be done as urgently as possible to address this general and worsening crisis. And this response must include the involvement of our people as a whole to enable these masses to exercise their right to determine their destiny. That it was and is therefore important to put in place a true national dialogue which would practically involve these masses in all their echelons, thus to insert their views into the national discussion in an organized and concerted manner. That ultimately a document which would reflect a true national consensus about what should be done to end and extricate our country from its general and worsening crisis. And that this document should respect the spirit of our Constitution, whatever amendments it might propose, if any. And this document would once more commit the masses of our people, as happened after the 1994 elections and after the adoption of our Constitution in 1996, consciously and actively to support and promote the objectives it would state. And the document would suggest that all state and other relevant institutions should act in a manner which consistently and honestly respects and promotes the popularly developed objectives and vision in that document. In summary, our national foundations have sponsored the National Dialogue Initiative, inspired to encourage the achievement of the objective to let the people speak. And so it must and will be that the National Foundations Dialogue Initiative creates the possibility that the people speak out freely in our democratic and constitutional space without let or hindrance to help determine their destiny.
Former President Kgalema Motlanthe also called for accountability in the country's leadership. Motlanthe went on to say that this dialogue seeks to be a turning point in the way South Africans relate to the political process.
The question that confronts us today as post-apartheid society is, why does South Africa need national dialogue? My take is that the consequences of having none are too ghastly to contemplate in a post-apartheid, post-colonial setting where the deformity of our historically defined ethical identity is all too real. Unfortunately, we have, as ordinary South Africans, allowed this possibility to exist. The construction of a new political reality for our country, expressed through our world-acclaimed constitution as the bedrock of our system of democracy, may have very well lulled us into a false state of self-satisfaction. Perhaps what we tend to forget in the excitement of the historical moment is that we are human, all too human, which means that we are no exception to the all too ubiquitous shortcomings that inhere in the human condition. Of course, we have still been alive to the urgent task of advancing our strategic goal, that is to build a united, democratic, non-racial, non-sexist, and just society, a task which we knew would be ongoing across generations. Similarly, our focus to address the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality never fizzled out of our collective consciousness. Our biggest oversight as a people lied in thinking that political leadership alone, on the strength of democratic mandate, would respond to these historical imperatives without falling prey to the temptations of power. Our system of democracy itself was modeled on the central assumptions that the ethically impeccable leadership model represented by the figure of President Nelson Mandela would continue to be the pivot on which would revolve leadership as society steamed on into the future. In such cases, societies let down their guard until, as seems to be the case now, they are shaken out of stupor by the turbulence of the historical process. At times, reaction during such seminal moments turns out to be too little too late. This is all the reason we should welcome the National Foundation's Dialogue Initiative. It is a timely idea. Its momentousness resides in the realization that something profoundly wrong is simmering in the very annals of our time. Only those who chose not to would fail to appreciate the progressive degeneracy of the culture of our national politics, along with the concomitant questions this poses for the cohesive vision predicative of our nation. This is how this gathering today becomes a national call. It seeks to be a turning point in the way the people of our country relate to the political process. It is only the beginning. We may see this as replanting of the seeds that must, with time, sprout into life for all seasons. Their blossoming will be forever a reminder that history should not repeat itself, lest we lapse into the same historical errors. The moral failings of our day cannot be allowed to calcify into irreversible reality. If we allowed this unwholesome character of politics to continue while we wallow in silence, history would never forgive our generation.
At the same time, the Executive Director of UN Women and former Deputy President Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka says that South Africa needs to go back to its roots of putting people first.
We are now in need of a leadership that can help us to restore the values that we have been losing. We need role models for this, and we need society at all levels to engage and to pull ourselves together. We need to return to the South Africa that is envisaged in our Constitution. We need leaders who serve instead of being served, and to restore Ubuntu to be part of the guiding principles for our nation. We are deeply in need of dialogue, where dissent is not seen as contentious. Youth and women have played an important and a positive role in our discourse. The women in our country and women in many parts of the world, including countries in conflict, are often a catalyst for change, able to stand for peace and reconciliation when nations tear themselves apart. Basadi, Batswara Tiba Gabuhali, in defense of the weak and the indigent, we fight for justice. We need to occupy that space again in our country, more decisively and deliberately. We must not hand over a divided, demoralized, unscrupulous country to the next generation, where there is mediocrity and greed. Instead, let us strive for excellence, Ubuntu and Batupile. Who stands to lose most if we do not find our way? The masses of our people who are still battling poverty and those who deserve and need services will lose. When we deliver those services, it is not a favor that we dispense, but a right that people must have. We must not expect to be thanked or rewarded, or even reward ourselves for doing our job, just as we cannot reward a fish for swimming. The women and girls who live and experience violence will lose when the institutions that are supposed to show zero tolerance to any form of violation of rights are themselves in crisis. The rights of women and those who have overcome many challenges are eroded when we fail to respect our Constitution and its values. When racism from all sides and xenophobia rears its ugly head, we all lose. That is why this is the time for dialogue. We need to restore decorum in Parliament. It is time for introspection and correctional action in the best interest of our society, for our hard-won freedom. From the current generation must not also lose out on the benefits of freedom, and the next generation must also cherish the freedom. We must dialogue towards a non-sexist, non-racist, democratic, and corruption-free South Africa.
The Janus Wallach parole matter has been postponed to May the 29th in the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein. The Justice Minister, Michael Masuta, has made an application to oppose the release of Wallach on parole. Masuta's spokesperson, Mthunzi Manga, says that the hearing was postponed because the minister did not consider the Hani family's statement when the initial heads of argument were filed. In fact, the magistrate, that is. The statement will now be added to the heads of argument for the next hearing. The High Court in Pretoria ordered the release of Wallach from prison. Judgment on the bail application of two Northwest men accused of killing a 16-year-old boy at Coleni is currently underway at the local court. The bail hearing for Pieter Doorwaard and Philip Skitter was brought forward following an urgent application to the Northwest High Court. The two men are accused of causing the teenager's death by pushing him from the back of a bakkie. They say that he fell off while they were taking him to the local police station after allegedly catching him stealing sunflowers. A heavy police presence is expected outside the courtroom following violent protest after an earlier court appearance by the accused. And that's your news for now. We'll take a short break, and when we return, Kendall Makamate will be back with your sports news.
cloud systems and robots have taken over a lot of what used to be done manually.
Our accounting system is actually based on the cloud.
Google nowadays can tell you where you parked your car.
And Africa's entrepreneurs are using technology to create.
With Pocket Masipala, you can basically do all the services that you would do at the municipality physically by going there, but you can now do them on a mobile app.
Join me, Spumelele Zondi, on Sundays at 9 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. It's now time for the sports. It's Friday morning. My name is Kendall Makamati. Time has just hit just after 11:30. Top of our stories for today, it's about the PSL, where Bidvest Wits are now 3 points clear of second place Mamelodi Sundowns in their Absa Premiership League standings. This comes after their 1-0 win over Orlando Pirates at the Bidvest Stadium in Mill Park. Now, while defending league champion Sundowns dropped points against Platinum Stars after playing to a 2-2 draw.
Favourites heading into this game, the Brazilians got off to a dream start. Thabo Ntete putting his team in the lead inside the opening 5 minutes of the contest. Not going down without a fight, the away side managed to restore parity 9 minutes later, courtesy of former Orlando Pirates striker Ndumiso Mabena.
Mabena can't get around his man, and Mabena has levelled it up with a great individual effort.
Intending to register their 6th league win in 7 matches, Sundowns were the quickest out of the blocks after the interval, committing more numbers going forward. Having taken the lead in the opening exchanges of the first half, Sundowns found themselves behind shortly after the restart in the second half, Mabena with his second on the night. However, that didn't last long, Yannick Zakri profiting from another poor defensive display by Dukwena to net his first league goal in the colours of Sundowns.
It's disappointing. And set pieces, even the second goal was a set piece. You know, quickly taken. Against Golden Arrows was the same thing. In the Nedbank Cup, quickly taken, they scored. But this is lessons in football, and you never know. Sometimes you're not happy with the point. Maybe we need that point. So, yeah, but to be honest, we should have won.
In the later kickoff on Thursday, Bidvest Wits made the most of Mamelodi Sundowns' slip-up, registering a vital 1-0 win over Orlando Pirates. The win sees Wits consolidate their position at the summit of the Absa Premier League with 54 points after 26 matches. Joseph Mohali, SABC News.
As you can see, the PSL title race has reached fever pitch. Let's have a quick look at results from last night, just to remind you of what it is we're talking about. Yes, 2-2 for Mamelodi Sundowns against Platinum Stars. You heard a little earlier on in our headlines that Pitso Musiman is not happy with that. They should have won that game, and absolutely they should have. And then Bidvest Wits extending their lead at the top of the log, which we're going to get to just now, with a 1-0 win over Orlando Pirates. Tonight, prior Cape Town City against Free State Stars, and then on Saturday a whole host of matches, as well as on Sunday Chief United, Ajax Supersport, Polokwane Kaizer Chiefs will be at home against Arrows. Then on Sunday, the big match of the weekend really is the one where Pirates will be hosting Mamelodi Sundowns at Orlando Stadium, 3 p.m. kickoff. That one will really tell the tale. Does Sundowns get to defend their title this year or not? watch out for that match. Platinum Stars against Highlands Park, and Highlands Park definitely trying not to drop into the NFD, and Biddersford against Maritzburg United, the first of the second group of matches where Maritzburg will be playing Sundowns on the 17th of May. Let's have a quick look at the log standings to see what's going on exactly there. 54 points for Biddersford, that's 3 points ahead of Sundowns, sitting on second position, both having played 26 matches, 4 games to go, ladies and gentlemen, until the end of the season. Also on 26 matches are the rest of the top 8. You'll see that Cape Town City FC, they're really not in it anymore. Neither is Kaizer Chiefs or SuperSport United. Yes, there's a mathematical chance or thereabouts if everybody else loses their matches like Wits and Chiefs wins all of their matches, they might get in there and win it, but it doesn't look like it's going to be likely. Orlando Pirates will be keen to make sure that they get a win against Mamelodi Sundowns because they've got people that are snapping at their heels trying to get in to the top 8. They're sitting on 31 points after 26 matches. And if we have a look at the bottom half of the log standings, you'll see exactly what it is I'm talking about. Also on 31 points, but the goal difference between Arrows and Pirates, there you have it. They're knocking on that door trying to get into the top 8, and so is Ajax Cape Town, and Platinum Stars are there and thereabouts as well. So it's all to play for between the top as well as the top 8. And if you look down towards the bottom of the log, 4 points in it between Bloem Celtic and Highlands Park. Who's going to get relegated this year, I ask you, and we'll see how it pans out. So every single match over the next couple of weeks is going to be key for every single team on this log. Staying with football news, SAFA has finally divulged South African football's worst kept secret. SuperSport United's Stuart Baxter is the new Bafana Bafana coach. The announcement ends months of speculation following the sacking of Shakes Mashaba last December. It will be the Scotsman's second stint as coach of the senior national football team. Let's have a listen.
This was Baxter's response when SABC News asked him about the Bafana Bafana coaching job just a couple of weeks ago.
I can't do anything about speculation. As you say, I'm happy here. You know, I've got to come out and say, throw my hat in the ring and say I really, really would love that job. I'm not going to say that because it's just speculation. You know, I'm happy here. So I don't know how to answer questions when people ask me. You know, I'm the SuperSport coach, happy here, talking to the club about a possible extension of my contract.
SAFA has been promising to unveil the new coach for months. Finally, the association delivered. Baxter returns to Bafana Bafana for the second time. His first stint was in 2004 and 2005. He left after failing to meet his mandate. The Scotsman returns, but is he the right man for the job?
I think Stuart's record speaks for itself, both at club level. I think when he was involved with Bafana, he didn't have a bad run. Unfortunately, for some reason, things didn't work out. He didn't qualify. And for the World Cup, I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he qualified for the AFCON. So yeah, those are things that we took into account, that Stuart's also his knowledge of local football was very important to us.
One thing is certain, Baxter was not the preferred candidate. Actually, he didn't even apply for the job. However, he met most of the criteria. His biggest drawback is his lack of coaching experience in African competitions.
There were some candidates that had a lot of experience, that had a fantastic track record, but they struggled in other areas of local knowledge, knowing what local footballers were about, etc. So you've got to balance the equation at times and say, okay, if somebody's not good in all 11, is it imperative that if he hasn't got experience in African football or extensive experience, would that hold against him? And we just felt, look, with the options we had, that Stuart would be able to overcome that challenge.
The SuperSport United coach will continue to fulfill his coaching responsibilities at the club for the remainder of the domestic and continental seasons. He will, however, be in charge of Bafana Bafana's match against Nigeria in an Africa Cup of Nations qualifier on the 10th of next month. Lebahan Tube, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, and that's exactly why this entire morning we have been asking you this in our poll for today. SAFA finally appointing a coach and Stuart Baxter being the man in the hot seat. Now, we've asked you, are you happy with this? And interesting enough, we've had 207 votes come in this morning, and 39% of you say, yes, you're definitely happy with Stuart Baxter being reappointed as Bafana coach after a long stint being a coach for clubs, whereas 61% say, no, he's not the right man. I wonder why. Let's find out from some of you what your reasons are for the way you voted. Untusisa Bikanyo says, not entirely happy with Baxter's appointment, but I'm happy that we have a coach at last. It has been frustrating. I think a lot of people would agree with you there. Ayat Naza says, not at all. Who knows how long will he last? What will he achieve? I do not think he has the ability to build and succeed. Give him time. Let's see what he can do in the second time around. Barry Martin says, when will Bafana qualify to play against international teams? If we just keeps it local, wake up, South Africa, and come alive. I'll tell you what, the very first match that Bafana have is a very important qualifier against, I could say their nemesis, Nigeria. We'll see how that pans out. Now moving on to other sporting stories from around the world. Manchester United's teenage striker Marcus Rashford struck a stunning second-half free kick to secure a 1-0 win at Celta Vigo in the Europa League semi-final first leg. Let's take a quick look at the highlights from last night.
Left-hand side, still Marcus Rashford. He's done well to get half a yard. Can he do it again? The jink and the curler! Brilliant save! Sergio Alvarez somehow tips that away. Pogba to use his strength, and this is a powerful run from Pogba. It's a good ball as well. Mkhitaryan really should have scored. Romero towards Fellaini, decent flick on for Lingard. Tries to force it through towards Rashford. Just hesitation there in the back line, and Lingard! Sergio Alvarez once again to the rescue. That's with a touch better from Celta Vigo. We've got options here. Sisto on this left-hand side. It's a good run from Johnny. Pione Sisto once again looks to come inside. Oh, just tipped over. His favourite here. It will be Rashford to strike it. This time Alvarez can't keep it out. He seemed to shuffle sideways before trying to stretch back to his right.
That's another teenage sensation from Europe. Now, talking about Europe, it's still a proposal, but the European Athletic Association's request to have world records in athletics rewritten has literally stirred up a hornet's nest. Following an unprecedented doping scandal in the sport last year and the year before, which saw Russian athletes banned from last year's Rio Olympic Games, the proposal to scrap all world records prior to the year 2005 has divided the sport. And according to former athletes, the ramifications could be far-reaching. Tausis Tole reports.
The past 12 months or so has seen South African athletics reach a high never seen since the likes of Marion Jones and Michael Johnson ran in what was then called the Engen Athletics Series more than a decade ago. Thanks to a new breed of athlete, they have catapulted South Africa as possibly the future of world sprinting. And of course, the country boasts a world record holder and Olympic champion in Wade van Niekerk. While the future looks bright locally, world athletics is in a tailspin as the European Athletics Association looks to wipe out a past that some of these athletes grew up aspiring to reach.
SEBCO has called for a global debate about this whole thing. How do we clean up athletics? And this is one of the reasons. You know, we've got a problem in athletics and we're trying to wean it out. And this is one of their ways of saying, let's get rid of the old records and let's start fresh.
Problem is, while catching drug cheats has improved over the past decade or so, and Luvo Manyonga's SA record of 8 meters 65 centimeters in the long jump at the recent SA Nationals has been ratified, how would the World Athletics justify stripping Mike Powell of the United States? His world record jump of 8 meters 95 he set in 1991, when testing was not as stringent.
You know, there's always been speculation about all these records, but we've never had any proof. How do we go and just erase people without proof? You know, that's the big concern. I mean, someone like Jonathan Edwards. No one's ever thought about Jonathan Edwards being part of a drug band, or if you want to call it, or for simpler terms. But now suddenly his record is going to go, and they're saying, well, it's because you're part of this whole era. You know, it's difficult, and I don't even know where I sit. I can see the pros for what Europe are proposing and for the young athletes, but I can also understand why these legends are going, well, you're taking something away from me.
Comrades Marathon, it's always a journey. You go through so many emotions.
And while the verdict is out on that decision, as a pronouncement might be made by the IAAF before the World Athletics Championships in August, the countdown clock to Comrades Marathon 2017 has hit the 30-day mark. The SABC met with the race's stakeholders for a bit of feedback following the 91st running last year, and to unveil plans for next month's uprun from Durban to Pietermaritzburg.
This is one of those marathons that, as a public broadcaster, we always think we can do better and how can we be more innovative, and which is why the likes of the sponsors like your Old Mutual and Bonitas will always be coming through to us and asking how can we make this broadcast more pleasurable. And I think and I believe that with the evolution of technology as well, we are one of the front runners from coverage, and I also believe that we can do more as SABC.
We have a prep meeting with the SABC team. We tell them some of the elements that we'd like them to focus on, and they tell us all the exciting things that they're going to cover. So yeah, 30 days, but still lots of time, still lots of work to do. We've got close to 2,000 people coming from outside of South Africa. So a lot of interest, a lot more runners from the UK, from Australia, from Brazil. The word's out there, and we do quite a lot of international marketing of the race, and that shows in the entrance.
Participation for Comrades 2017 is kept at 20,000 athletes. On the day, despite the host broadcasters' resources being stretched to the limit, they always put out a winning performance. No wonder they feel that one day they'll put up a winning performance on the route as well.
SABC, we've got an athletics team. When are we winning the Comrades Marathon as the SABC?
Well, I think maybe I must start running as well. We have, one of my presenters, Gwena Mwabelo, I know he runs every year, and I even told him that, Gwena, if you do not win this time, we'll have a serious problem.
Zinigele. Give it your all is the motto for Comrades 2017. So see you at the finish line. Tabiso Sitola, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Now, a phenomenal report there by Tabiso Sitola there. I'm talking about marathons. We've also got a Nike Sub 2 that's being tried on the weekend at the Monza Formula 1 racing course, where Nike has got 3 runners who are going to be trying for the first time to run a marathon in under 2 hours. We've got 3 runners from East Africa. We've got Lelisa Desisa of Ethiopia, Eliud Kipchoge of Kenya, and Zesina Tadese of Eritrea in the brand new Nike shoe to see if they're going to be the first. One of them is going to be the first one to run a marathon in under 2 hours. Should make for interesting reporting come Monday morning. Make sure you come back and join us. Now, before I let you go and say goodbye, I need to tell you about round 11 of Super Rugby 2017, which has rolled around, and the lay of the land has become clearer, with New Zealand sides once again showing their vast superiority over the rest of the other participants, and the rest trying not to just make up the numbers. Here's a full fixture list of what's happening this weekend. First up, as you can see, a match that's already been played between Hurricanes and Stormers. The Hurricanes are thrashing the Stormers 41-22. That one kicked off at 9:35. Then later on, the Highlanders travel to Toyota Stadium in Free State at 7 p.m. to play the Cheetahs. Saturday morning, 7 o'clock in the morning at the AMI Park is Rebels against the Lions. The Lions really are at the top of the heap from South African sides to see if they can actually beat another Australian side. Yarra Road is where the Chiefs will host the Reds. Waratahs will be hosting the Blues, and the Force travel to Durban where they'll play the Sharks. And the Crusaders, who really are looking like real title contenders once again this year, they go to Loftus to face a Wolfville Bulls this year. The Jaguares, they'll be hosting the Japanese side. The Sunwolf at the Estadio Jose Amalfitani in Buenos Aires, Argentina. That match kicking off at 20 minutes to midnight on Saturday night. Now, to leave you, we'll leave you with a really interesting discussion that's been had that we were at a little earlier on, where 3 former presidents and a deputy president have gathered in Parktown, Joburg, to discuss the general crisis facing South Africa in the National Foundation's Forum Dialogue. Let's go back there now, live. You've been watching Newsroom. Until next week,
of ordinary citizens. This responsibility was sadly abdicated to political representatives, and the time has come for us to reclaim it. The Chief Albert Luthuli Foundation accordingly saw the Foundation's Dialogue Initiative as an important platform to advance these ideals. The hallmark of Chief Albert Luthuli's exemplary, ethical, and responsible leadership was to promote active engagement on all issues affecting society across race, class, gender, sexual orientation in their established formations in order to promote social cohesion. South Africans today, more than ever before, need to engage on these issues that will characterize the future of this beautiful nation. And we see these as, number one, the engagement on an inclusive economic dispensation. CODESA remains one of the greatest dialogue interventions to deliver an equitable political dispensation to all South Africans. However, the political dividend bequeathed in 1994 has not been met by an economic dividend to ensure that the ideals of the Freedom Charter are realized. The country needs urgently to engage in an economic CODESA, lest the political gains are eroded by frustrations born out of economic exclusion. Secondly, we see engagement on the level of poverty and of inequality and poverty alleviation. The World Economic Forum on Africa held this week in Durban has clearly demonstrated that exclusionary growth has a negative correlation with investment. The current trajectory, where the country's wealth is concentrated in the hands of a tiny minority, is as unsustainable in its inevitably destabilizing consequences. The level of inequality and poverty in the Republic is more endemic in rural households and is borne mainly by women and children, which is unacceptable in any humane society. Central to poverty alleviation is a constructive dialogue about patterns of land ownership in the country to facilitate small-scale farming, a pillar of our patrons' philosophies. Experiences from India, Bangladesh, and Ethiopia confirm that small-scale farming that is integrated into the agri-processing value chain accounts for close to 90% of the household income of the most marginalized in society. Robust engagement in this regard is urgently required if South Africa is to achieve this, and this initiative must seek to put this squarely on its agenda. The third issue we would like to see us dialoguing about is education and the youth. Young people make up approximately 50% of South Africa's population, yet are the most economically excluded, with youth unemployment hovering in the 65% region. The education system remains the chief contributor to this parlous state, having humiliatingly failed to transform young lives. The manifestations of youth challenges are various social ills, including the scourge of drugs and disease. The high degree of isolation resulting from this, resulting in despondency, depression, anxiety, and many other psychosomatic disorders. As a nation, we can ill afford to sacrifice the future core of leaders. The NFDI needs to put this firmly on its agenda. Lastly, we would like to see an engagement on the issue of workers' rights. Workers remain the backbone of the economy, yet their voices are continuously being undermined both by employers and their trade union formations. Shop floor issues, including the minimum wage, working conditions, mechanization, etc., are currently being sacrificed at the altar of political alignment and economic lobbying. Worker formations are splitting up, leading up to a weakened labor movement. We see the NFDI actively engaging with workers to ensure that they have a proper platform to address their issues. In conclusion, we remain confident that South Africa is rich with promise. We are therefore excited to form part of this exciting initiative that seeks to close the conversational gap between those in power and ordinary citizens. The dialogue initiative is not a unique concept, but represents the revival of the grassroots inclusive nature of vision formulation, where ordinary people are actively involved in articulating their vision of an alternative society. We thank you.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I speak on behalf of the Helen Suzman Foundation. The foundation that includes our patrons, our trustees, our staff, and our donors are all very excited about this initiative. When it was first mooted some 2 years ago, there was enthusiasm, and now today there's the realization that, in a sense, this initiative has arrived. And that, I think, is a cause for great celebration. What brought us together, I think, 2 years ago, was what I want to call the emerging crisis. And we've heard from various speakers. Mr. de Klerk had first raised the questions of these challenges, which are economic, which are social, and which are also political. Crucially, they're also constitutional. What provided us in our early discussions was an awareness that the Constitution does provide a framework for our own discussions, the discussions amongst ourselves. And I think the one point which I mentioned at our press launch 3 days ago was that if these foundations can come together in respect, mutual respect, exchange ideas, and sometimes with quite different ideological assumptions underpinning their existence, then why can't the rest of the society come together and start talking? And it's in the nature of a dialogue that we proceeded, and that we hope the national dialogue proceeds. A dialogue is about speaking, but crucially, it's also about listening. And I think that very often we are dealing with a situation of speaking, but who's listening? Those of you who knew Helen Suzman knew that she could speak. My goodness, could she talk? But crucially, she always said, listen and go and see for yourselves. And I think it's incumbent upon us to listen to one another. And the nature of this dialogue, then, is not only about speaking, but it's about listening. Back to our Constitution. It's a remarkable document. It provides a framework which not only protects our rights, but it also offers us a transformative path for a better South Africa for all who live in it. Mr. President Mbeki had spoken forcefully in his presentation about the origins of our Constitution. And in that, I think there's a lesson. This was not imposed from above. This was put into place by our representatives, and unanimously. And that really is the pathway. There's enough in our Constitution which has not been explored yet for us to understand its truly transformative nature. And I think I would suggest that as we proceed with a discussion around the challenges which this country faces, that we remember that the Constitution...
It's your Friday edition of the Midday Report. A very good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us. Let's take a quick look at what's coming up in your headlines. While the World Economic Forum on Africa wraps up in